I remember the thick fog that clung to the gaslit streets of London on the night I first heard his name whispered, Spring-heeled Jack. It was early in the year 1838, and my family's modest home sat on the border between Battersea and Clapham Common. Though I was only 20 years of age, I had heard far too many tales of unearthly happenings in the city. My father, a clerk at the local parish, maintained his skepticism, dismissing all mention of dark shapes leaping over rooftops. My mother, on the other hand, clutched her rosary whenever rumours stirred, certain a demon stalked the streets. I often found myself torn between belief and doubt, but I was soon to learn that some stories deserve our fear. Not more than a fortnight before my encounter, the newspapers had been abuzz with disturbing reports from across London. People claimed that a figure with devilish red eyes and a long cloak had been terrifying young women, sometimes even clawing at them with metallic talons. A barmaid in Lavender Hill swore that he spat blue fire from his mouth, scorching the hem of her dress. Others insisted that he had horns. And the sightings all agreed on one uncanny talent. He could spring onto walls and rooftops, as if gravity held no authority over his body. This was how the press gave him his name, Spring-heeled Jack. Despite the lurid accounts, no one I knew personally had actually come face to face with the creature. The rumours mostly circled around taverns, feeding on drink-fueled fears until the authorities were forced to take them seriously. Superintendent Scales of the local station was known to wave away stories of ghosts and ghouls, but even he seemed on edge. Police patrols were doubled, and an unspoken curfew settled over Battersea at dusk. My father demanded we stay indoors once the sun dipped, but curiosity got the better of me. I was eager, in that foolish way of youth, to see for myself whether this terror was real. One particularly cold January evening, I found myself alone in the house. My mother was at a neighbour's, nursing a sick child, and my father had gone to his nighttime duties at the parish. Though I had promised not to leave, the cabin fever grew unbearable. Slipping on my coat and scarf, I ventured out into the fog-shrouded streets. The gas lamps glowed weakly, as though even they cowered from whatever lurked among the shadows. My heart pounded, but I had resolved to walk only the short distance to the corner grocer to purchase tea leaves. The wind that night howled like a wounded animal, and every rustling leaf had me spinning to see what moved behind me. The hush of the neighborhood was unnatural. Under normal circumstances, one might hear the laughter of old friends parting ways, or the scuff of boots on cobblestone. But that night, it felt as if the whole city held its breath. My footsteps echoed impossibly loud in the stillness. Then came the sound I wish I had never heard, a disembodied screech that set my teeth on edge. I paused, gripping my coat tightly around my neck. I tried to convince myself that the sound was nothing more than a fox or a stray cat, but the panic in my chest refused to quiet. I hurried to the grocer's shop, only to find it closed and boarded, with a hastily scrawled note pinned to the door. Closed on account of the terror. The hammered message confirmed my suspicion. Fear had seized the hearts of even the most pragmatic business owners. I realized how isolated I was, standing there with no recourse. Ahead was only more darkness. Behind me lay the meager comfort of my own door. As I turned to head back home, that screech rose again, this time much closer. My ears rang with dread. The street lamp above me guttered, the flame flickering as though brushed by a sudden gust of wind. I froze, heart stuttering in my chest. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move, a shadow detaching itself from the blackness between two tall row houses. My breath caught as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. A figure, impossibly tall and lean, leaned forward under the light. The lamplight caught his eyes, making them glow like embers in a dying fire. He wore something akin to a tight-fitting oilskin suit, and a cape hung from his shoulders. I cannot say which sensation overwhelmed me first, the crawling fear on my skin or the hammered beat of my heart. My knees felt like water, threatening to drop me at any moment. Then he sprang. There was no running start, no crouch in preparation. He simply leaped, clearing the cobblestone street in a single bound, landing mere feet from where I stood. His boots made not a sound as they touched the ground. I should have screamed. Perhaps I did. The memory is a blur of terror. Up close, spring-heeled Jack was more monstrous than any newspaper description. The flicker of the lamp revealed a face half hidden by some metallic contraption, and when he opened his mouth, I glimpsed a haze of blue flame at the back of his throat, as though something hellish burned within him. Then he laughed, a rasping cackle that sent a tremor up my spine. With a flick of his wrist, he extended a clawed hand. The metal tips on his fingers scraped the stone underfoot as he advanced. I backed away, my shoulders pressed to the shop door, trying to blend into the very wood. To my horror, he moved his face close to mine, and I could smell sulphur and brimstone. I locked eyes with him, though every instinct told me to look away. Those eyes, glowing crimson with an intensity I cannot put into words, bored into me as if unraveling my soul. Then he spoke, a garbled mix of words and laughter. "You've come out too late, child," he hissed, the edges of his lips curling into a twisted grin. "Shall we dance on the rooftops?" At that, his hand flew to his mouth, and I expected him to unleash another ball of blue flame, but instead he shrieked. The sound was so jarring, so inhuman, that I clapped my hands to my ears, sinking down to my knees in terror. In my periphery, I glimpsed movement from further down the street. 2 policemen, drawn by the commotion, running toward us with lanterns raised. Their shouts echoed off the walls, but Jack barely seemed disturbed. He turned sharply, letting out a maniacal cackle. Before the officers could reach us, he leaped again, ascending the building beside us in one bound. He clung to the ledge like some infernal insect, perching on the very edge of the rooftop. One of the policemen aimed a pistol and fired, but the shot went wide. Without so much as a flinch, Jack sprang to the adjacent rooftop and disappeared into the swirling fog. I remained there, trembling, as the policeman reached me. In the stunned silence, I realized tears were streaming down my face. They escorted me home, where my mother had returned and was frantic with worry. The more I tried to explain what I had seen, the more my voice quivered, and soon I was crying uncontrollably. My father took me by the shoulders and asked if I was hurt. My hands shook, but I managed to show him I was unscathed, a cold comfort, given the shock that lingered in my mind. By the time the policeman left, I could barely recall the details of Jack's face. My father tried to convince me that I was simply frightened by a mischievous ruffian, that no man could truly leap like a demon. But I saw my mother's eyes and knew she believed my every word. The next days passed in a haze of fear and dread. I refused to leave the house after sundown, locking doors and windows as soon as the last sliver of sunlight disappeared behind the rooftops. Every night, I heard his laughter in my dreams. Newspapers continued to report new sightings. A young woman in Clapham had been cornered in an alley, scratched by the fiend's metal claws, left with burns from a breath of blue fire. A mail coach driver outside Blackheath swore he saw a dark figure bounding through the trees before vanishing in a single leap. Panic spread, and the authorities seemed powerless to capture him. Despite my father's best attempts at reassurance, I knew that what I had seen was not a mere mortal. Yet, every so often, I would recall a detail that made me wonder. His suit, though strange, might have been some contraption designed by a twisted mind. The blue flame, could it have been the illusion of a chemical reaction, something an inventor might craft to frighten unsuspecting souls? Still, even the most rational explanations failed to account for the unearthly leaps I witnessed. 1 week after my encounter, I summoned the courage to walk along Clapham Common during daylight, accompanied by my mother. The winter sun hung low, casting long shadows across the park. I kept expecting him to appear behind every tree or leap out from the thick brush. My mother clutched her rosary, muttering prayers to Saint Michael. But thankfully, we saw nothing out of the ordinary. It almost felt as though the city had breathed a sigh of relief, yet I knew better than to let my guard down. That night, as a cold rain fell, I found I could not sleep. Thunder rattled the window panes. Every flash of lightning made me fear I'd see him standing in the street below, his silhouette waiting for my gaze. In one brilliant flash, the room lit up, and a monstrous shape flickered on the window's glass. I leapt out of bed, heart hammering, only to see it was the shape of a tree branch. My relief was immediate, but short-lived. Outside, in the howling wind, I thought I heard the echo of that sinister laugh. I recount these events now, years later, from the safety of the same modest home in Battersea. Spring-heeled Jack remains an enigma, his legend woven into the tapestry of London's darkest nights. Although sightings have waned, there are always new stories surfacing in hushed corners of public houses. A man who leaps over carriage horses near Aldgate, a cloaked figure dancing across St. Paul's Dome before dawn. Some dismiss these as drunken tales, pranks perpetuated by fools in costumes. Yet I know what I saw was far from any simple joke. The memory of his glowing red eyes, his metallic claws, and his impossible, gravity-defying leaps is etched upon my very bones. To those who read my account and scoff, I have only one warning. Be cautious when treading the lonely streets after dark. Sometimes, shadows conceal wonders or terrors beyond our understanding. And if you ever hear that strange, piercing screech echoing through the fog, or glimpse a dark shape perched on a rooftop, do not linger. For Spring-heeled Jack is more than a story, and I, for one, would not wish a personal encounter upon my worst enemy. Perhaps he walks among us still, waiting to pounce once more from the London night, a devilish grin on his lips and a flicker of blue flame in his breath. If so, may God help us all.